My name is Camilla. I'm 38 years old, and if you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably say I'm the youngest, the one with her head in the clouds. I grew up in New York City, in a world of glass towers and dinner parties, where expectations were as high as the skyline and just as cold. My parents were the kind who believed in pedigree degrees, titles, perfect resumes. My father, a corporate attorney, always said there were two kinds of people, those who make things happen and those who watch. He never said which one he thought I was. He didn't have to. I'm the youngest of three sisters, and if you've ever been the last in line, you know what it's like to live in someone else's shadow. Sophia, my oldest sister, is a renowned surgeon. Lucia, the middle one, is a professor at Columbia, with a wall of awards and a husband who's a hedge fund manager. At family gatherings, their stories fill the room, saving lives, publishing research, buying a second home in the Hamptons. When it's my turn, I see my father's polite smile, my mother's careful nod. Camilla's always been creative, she says, as if creativity is a flaw to be managed, not a gift to be celebrated. I run a tech company now, but for years no one in my family took it seriously. When I quit my job at a prestigious consulting firm to launch my own startup, my father called it a phase. My mother worried I'd never find a husband if I kept working so much. Even when I raised my first $1 million in venture capital, my sisters congratulated me with the same tone they used when I won a spelling bee in 3rd grade, proud but faintly surprised. At holidays, the conversation always circled back to Sophia's latest surgery, or Lucia's keynote speech. I learned to measure my words to keep my ambitions quiet. It was easier than feeling the sting of being overlooked. It's strange the way families build you up and break you down in the same breath. My parents wanted the best for me, but their idea of best never matched my own. They believed in stability, in tradition, in the kind of success you can put on a Christmas card. I believed in risk, in vision, in building something from nothing. That difference became a chasm. Sometimes it felt like I was speaking a language only I could understand. The pressure wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just a look, a pause, a question that lingered too long. Are you sure you're happy? Don't you want something more secure? Maybe you should think about grad school. I started to wonder if I was making choices for myself or just rebelling against the path they'd laid out for me. I wanted their approval, but I wanted my own life more. That tug of war shaped everything. My career, my relationships, even the way I saw myself. I became an expert at pretending I didn't care, but inside I was always measuring, always hoping for a sign that I was enough. Sometimes I think my family sees me as a cautionary tale, the one who took too many risks, who never quite fit the mold. But I know what they don't, that every time they doubted me, it made me work harder. That every time they compared me to my sisters, I built something of my own. I'm still learning how to stop seeking their validation, how to define success on my own terms. But the truth is, the feeling of being underestimated never really leaves you. It just changes shape, becoming the fire that keeps you moving forward, even when no one else is watching. The summer I turned 30, my brother Matthew's wedding was the biggest event my family had hosted in years. The guest list read like a who's who of Manhattan society, over 400 people, including CEOs, politicians, and distant cousins I'd never met. My parents rented out the entire rooftop of the Park Hyatt, dropping nearly $500,000 on the venue alone. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the $10,000 floral arrangements to the custom ice sculptures and the 12-tier cake that cost more than my first car. It was the kind of wedding that made headlines in society magazines, a statement of our family's place in the world. I arrived early, clutching the $25,000 check I'd written as a wedding gift, a contribution I could barely afford, but felt obligated to give. I was proud of what I'd accomplished that year. My startup had just secured a $20 million Series B investment, and for the first time I felt like I could hold my own in conversations about money and success. I wore a navy silk dress, simple but elegant, and told myself I belonged there, even if my mother's eyes flickered with disappointment when she saw me. The ceremony was beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. My sisters were both bridesmaids, their names printed in gold on the program. My own name was missing. When I asked my mother about it, she waved me off. It's just tradition. Camilla, don't make a scene. I tried to laugh it off, but the sting lingered. At the reception, the seating chart was a masterpiece of social engineering. The important guests, my father's business partners, Matthew's in-laws, and of course Sophia and Lucia sat at the front near the couple. I found my name at a table near the back, squeezed between a distant cousin and one of my father's junior associates. I tried not to let it bother me, but as the night wore on, the feeling of being sidelined grew heavier. Then during the speeches, the bride, Charlotte, took the microphone. She was radiant, her voice clear and commanding. I want to thank everyone who made this day possible, she said, her eyes sweeping the room. Especially my new sisters, Sophia and Lucia, who have been like family to me from the very start. The applause was thunderous. I waited, hoping she would mention me. She didn't. Instead, she turned to me, her smile tight. And Camilla, thank you for your generous gift. We know startups can be risky, so we appreciate your effort. The room went silent for a moment, then laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt my face burn. I wanted to disappear. I excused myself and stepped out onto the balcony, the city lights blurring as I blinked back tears. My phone buzzed a text from Daniel, my boyfriend. How's the circus, he wrote. I almost smiled. He always knew how to make me laugh. Even on the worst days, I replied. Wish you were here, he didn't answer. Later that night, as the party raged on, I slipped away to check my phone again. Still nothing from Daniel. I tried to call him, but it went straight to voicemail. My stomach twisted with worry. Something felt off. I opened my banking app on a whim, a habit I'd picked up since launching my company. My heart dropped. Our joint account, which should have held $250,000, was empty. Every cent was gone. I scrolled through the transactions, my fingers shaking. Wire transfers, all to accounts I didn't recognize, processed just hours before. Panic set in. I called Daniel again. No answer. I texted him, my messages growing more frantic. Where are you? What happened to our money? Minutes passed. Nothing. I felt the world tilt beneath me. I stumbled back inside, searching for my mother. When I found her, I could barely speak. Daniel took the money. All of it. He's gone. Her face hardened. We warned you about him, Camilla. You're too trusting, too naive. The words hit harder than I expected. No comfort, no anger, just disappointment. As if I'd confirmed every fear she'd ever had about me. I stood there surrounded by laughter and champagne, feeling utterly alone. I'd lost $250,000, my boyfriend, and whatever fragile respect my family might have had for me all in one night. The shame was overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to run, to undo the entire day. But all I could do was stand there, clutching my empty phone, wishing I could disappear into the city lights. I don't remember leaving the wedding. One moment I was standing in the middle of the ballroom, my mother's words echoing in my ears, and the next I was in the back of a cab, the city rushing past in a blur of neon and rain. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone. I kept staring at the empty account, willing the numbers to change, to go back to what they were just hours ago. But the truth was right there in black and white. $250,000 gone. Stolen by the man I thought I loved. The cab dropped me at my apartment and I stumbled inside, numb. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my navy silk dress, and let the silence wrap around me. The city outside was alive, but I felt like I was underwater. Everything muffled and slow. I wanted to cry, to scream, to smash something. But nothing came, just emptiness. I replayed every conversation with Daniel, every moment that should have been a warning. The way he'd insisted on joining our finances, the way he'd laughed when I said I wanted to keep things separate. We're a team. He'd said his smile so warm I'd believed him. I thought about the nights he'd stayed up late, helping me practice my pitch for investors, whispering that I was brilliant, that I could change the world. Was any of it real? Or had he just been waiting for the right moment to take what he wanted and run? My phone buzzed. Sophia calling for the third time. I let it ring. I couldn't bear to hear her voice, to answer her questions. I imagined her sitting in her perfect apartment, glass of wine, in hand shaking her head. I told you so, Camilla. That was always the subtext, even when she tried to be kind. I thought about Lucia too, how she'd probably turn my disaster into a lesson for her students. "This is why you don't mix business and pleasure," she'd say, her voice gentle but firm. I shut my eyes and tried to breathe, but the memories wouldn't stop. I remembered being 12, painting a mural on my bedroom wall. My father had walked in frowning at the mess. "Art is nice, Camilla, but it won't pay the rent." I remembered the time in college when I'd won a national design competition, and my mother had barely looked up from her laptop. "That's lovely, dear." But what about law school? I remembered every time I'd been left off the guest list, every time my ideas were dismissed as childish dreams. Now sitting alone in my apartment, I felt all those old wounds reopen. The wedding was just the latest reminder that I didn't belong. Not in my family, not in Daniel's world, maybe not anywhere. The pain was sharp, but underneath it was something colder: anger. At Daniel for betraying me, at my family for never believing in me, at myself for letting it all happen. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city. Somewhere out there, Daniel was spending my money, starting a new life. I pressed my forehead to the glass and let the anger build. I thought about calling him, demanding an explanation, but I knew it wouldn't matter. He was gone. He'd made his choice. Now I had to make mine. The first thing I did was call my bank. I froze every account, changed every password, set up alerts for any suspicious activity. I spent hours on the phone with customer service, my voice flat and cold. "Yes, I'd like to report fraud. No, I don't know where he is. Yes, I understand the money may be gone for good." I hired a lawyer the next day, a woman named Rachel who specialized in financial crimes. She was brisk and efficient, her questions cutting through my fog. "We'll do everything we can," she said, "but you need to prepare yourself. This could take months, maybe years." I stared at my account balance, $32 million left. It was more money than most people would ever see, but it felt like nothing, like a house built on sand. I'd worked so hard for every dollar, every investment, every bit of respect, and in one night it had all been tainted. I wanted to call my family to ask for help, but I couldn't. Pride kept me silent. I knew what they'd say. "We warned you. You should have listened." I couldn't bear to hear it. So I did what I always did. I worked, I poured every ounce of pain, every bit of anger into my company. I fired Daniel from the board, cut off all contact, deleted every photo, every message. I told my team he'd left for personal reasons. No one asked questions. They'd seen enough founders fall apart over less. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Daniel. The way he'd held my hand at investor meetings, the way he'd whispered that I was his lucky charm. I wondered if he'd ever loved me, or if I'd just been a stepping stone. I thought about my family, about all the times I'd tried to prove myself to earn their approval. Was I really any different now? Or was I still the little girl painting murals, desperate for someone to say, "You matter"? My therapist, Dr. Patel, told me I was grieving more than just money. "You're mourning the loss of trust, Camilla, the loss of a future you thought you had." She was right. I'd built my whole life on the idea that if I worked hard enough, if I loved deeply enough, I'd be safe, but nothing was safe. Not love, not family, not even success. Sometimes I wondered if I should just walk away, sell the company, disappear, start over somewhere. No one knew my name. But every time I thought about quitting, I felt that old anger rise up again. I wasn't going to let Daniel win. I wasn't going to let my family be right about me. I was going to survive this, even if it meant doing it alone. I stopped answering calls, even from Sophia and Lucia. The silence became my armor. I needed space to think, to heal, to figure out who I was. Without Daniel, without my family's approval. I started running every morning, pounding the city streets until my legs ached and my mind went quiet. I ate alone, worked alone, slept alone. It was lonely, but it was mine. In the quiet, I started to remember who I was before all of this. The girl who painted murals, who dreamed big, who wasn't afraid to take risks. I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to fit into boxes that were never meant for me. Maybe it was time to build my own. But even as I tried to move forward, the doubt lingered. Was I strong enough to do this on my own? Could I ever trust anyone again? Was it possible to be part of a family that would never truly see me? The questions haunted me, but for the first time I wasn't afraid to face them. I was angry, I was hurt, but I was still here, and that had to count for something. 3 years later, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, watching the sunset paint the Manhattan skyline in streaks of gold. My company, Vivid Canvas, now valued at $180 million, had just secured a partnership with a Fortune 100 tech giant. The board wanted to expand the executive team, and HR had spent weeks sifting through resumes. When my assistant Mara slid a folder across my desk that afternoon, I almost didn't open it. "This one's interesting," she said, her voice carefully neutral. The name on the resume stopped me cold. Daniel Harper. My fingers tightened on the paper. His work history was a graveyard of short-lived roles, 6 months at a failing fintech startup, a year at a consulting firm that had just laid off 30% of its staff. His last listed salary was $120,000, a fraction of the $300,000 he'd once bragged about earning. I stared at his headshot. He looked older. His smile strained his eyes dull. The man who'd once charmed investors with a wink now radiated desperation. "Schedule an interview. I told Mara tomorrow morning, don't tell him who he's meeting." He didn't recognize me at first. I'd cut my hair into a sharp bob, traded my cardigans for tailored blazers, and learned to walk in heels that clicked like a metronome. When he walked into the conference room, he glanced at the woman in the chair, Mara playing decoy before turning to me. "Miss Reyes will see you now," she said, nodding in my direction. His head snapped around. For a heartbeat, the room felt airless, his face paled, his mouth slackening. "Camilla." I didn't smile. "Have a seat, Daniel." He collapsed into the chair, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his portfolio. The Daniel I'd known had always been all swagger and smirks. This man looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "You're the CEO," he stammered. "Since 2024, I said, flipping through his resume. "Your last role ended in layoffs. Why?" He shifted, sweat beading at his temple. Market downsizing. I was restructuring. "You were let go because your division's revenue dropped 40% under your leadership." I interrupted, tapping the report my team had pulled overnight. "You're $85,000 in credit card debt. Your landlord filed an eviction notice last month." His chair squeaked as he recoiled. "How did you—" "Due diligence." I closed the folder. "Why do you want this job?" He leaned forward, his voice cracking. "Camilla, please. I know what I did was. I've changed. I'm trying to rebuild." The room hummed with silence. I could smell his cologne, the same citrus and sandalwood scent he'd worn the night he'd emptied our account. Memories surged his laugh as he toasted my first investment, his hand on my lower back at parties, the note he'd scrawled, "You'll never make it without me." "Rebuild," I repeated. "You stole $250,000 from me. You left me to explain to my investors why their money vanished. You laughed when I begged you to answer my calls." He flinched. I was scared. I panicked. "But you look at you now, you're thriving. Doesn't that prove I was wrong?" I stood pacing to the window. The city sprawled below, a testament to every late night, every tear, every time I'd picked myself up after his betrayal. "This isn't about you being wrong, Daniel. It's about you needing me." 2 hours later, the board erupted. "You hired him. The guy who robbed you," demanded Raj, our CFO, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. "He'll leak IP, he'll sabotage us." I waited for the room to quiet. "He'll report directly to Mara's 6-month probation. No access to financials or client data. Salary capped at $120,000, half of what he stole." "Then why take the risk?" asked Evelyn, our lead investor. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. "So he can sit in an open-floor cubicle watching every headline we make. So he can see the exit interviews when employees call me the best boss they've ever had. So he can understand what he lost." The room buzzed. Evelyn tilted her head. "And if he quits?" "He won't," I said. "He's desperate." The next morning I watched from my office as Daniel shuffled to his desk. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie slightly crooked. He glanced up, catching my eye through the glass. For a moment the mask slipped shame, resentment, awe, before he looked away. Mara appeared in my doorway holding a coffee. He asked for a 401k match. I snorted denied. But as I turned back to my laptop, my chest tightened. This wasn't the revenge fantasy I'd imagined. The man who'd once reduced me to a sobbing mess in a wedding gown now flinched when I entered a room. Yet the victory felt hollow, like chasing the ghost of a girl who died that night. At 3:00 p.m. he knocked on my door. "Can we talk privately?" I motioned him in. He stood awkwardly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Camilla. Truly." I studied him, the way his shoulders hunched, the tremor in his hands. The Daniel I'd loved was gone, and the man left behind was just small. "You don't get to apologize," I said softly. "You get to work, and if you miss one deadline, one meeting, I'll fire you so fast you'll forget you ever had my name on your resume." He nodded, eyes downcast, and left. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, scrolling through photos of my family's latest vacation. Sophia in Switzerland, Lucia at a conference in Dubai. No one had mentioned the wedding in years. No one had asked how I'd rebuilt. But as rain pattered against the windows, I realized something I didn't need them to. Daniel's resume still sat on my desk. A relic of the past, I tucked it into a drawer next to the sketchbook I kept since I was 12. On its frayed pages, a girl with wild hair and paint-stained hands grinned up at me, unafraid. Finally, she seemed to say, "Look how far we've come." The office hummed with the energy of a company on the brink of something monumental. My CFO Raj had just handed me the Q3 report, $28 million in revenue, a 40% increase from the previous quarter. But the number that mattered most was the one I'd scribbled on a post-it note stuck to my monitor, $250,000, the exact amount Daniel had stolen, the exact salary I'd capped him at for the next 5 years. He knocked on my door at 4:00 p.m., his collar slightly askew. "You wanted to see me." I motioned to the chair. "Sit." He hesitated, then complied. The confidence he'd once worn like a second skin had eroded, replaced by a nervous tick in his jaw. For weeks, I'd watched him shuffle between cubicles, ignored by colleagues who'd heard whispers about his past. Today, though, he'd crossed a line. I slid a document across the desk, a spreadsheet detailing every dollar he'd cost the company in lost productivity. "You submitted a proposal to the board behind my back. You quoted my metrics from last year's acquisition as your own." He paled. I thought they'd want to see my initiative. Initiative? My voice stayed calm. A technique I'd learned from Dr. Patel. You used proprietary data to inflate your value. Again. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. "Camilla, please, I'm trying to rebuild my life." I leaned forward, my gold CEO nameplate catching the light. "You don't get to rebuild on my integrity. Not after what you did." 3 hours later, I stood in my childhood home, the scent of my mother's Chanel No. 5 clinging to the air like a ghost. The annual Reyes Family Thanksgiving Summit was in full swing, a spectacle of crystal stemware and thinly veiled competition. My father's voice boomed from the dining room. Lucia's publishing another paper. Sophia's hospital promoted her too. "Camilla," my mother appeared in the foyer, her smile brittle. "We didn't think you'd come." "I'm not staying." I handed her the embroidered linen napkin I'd brought every year since I was 16, a tradition she'd once called quaint. "I came to return this." Her smile faded. "What's wrong?" "I'm done," I said louder than I'd intended. The chatter in the dining room died. Done pretending I'm the family's cautionary tale. Done letting you dismiss everything I've built. My father appeared in the doorway. His tie loosened. "Camilla, this isn't the time." It's exactly the time. I turned to my mother, whose hand trembled around the napkin. "When I told you Daniel stole from me, you said we warned you. When I sold my first company for $15 million, you asked when I'd settle down. You've spent 38 years waiting for me to fail. Well, I'm done waiting for you to care." The room froze. Sophia set down her wine glass. Lucia's husband muted the football game. My mother's voice wavered. We only wanted what was best for you. No, I shook my head. You wanted what was best for you, a daughter who fit the mold. But I'm not Sophia. I'm not Lucia. I'm the one who turned a sketchbook into a $180 million company. And if that's not enough for you, then I'm done trying. The fallout was swift. My father called the next morning, his tone clipped. Your mother's devastated. Was that necessary? Yes. He sighed, the same sigh he'd used when I dropped out of law school. You've changed. I have. I glanced at the Forbes article framed on my wall. Camila Reyes, The Art of Disruption. But you haven't, and I won't wait around for you to catch up. I hung up, then drafted an email to my sisters. Effective immediately, I'm withdrawing from the family trust. Keep the penthouse. Keep the stock portfolios. I'll keep building something that's mine. See? Lucia replied first. This is extreme. Let's talk, Sophia. Mum's crying. What did you do? I didn't respond. At the office, Daniel lingered by my door the next week. Can I ask you something? I didn't look up from my screen. Make it quick. Why keep me here to punish me? Finally, I met his gaze to prove something to myself. What? That I don't need you, or them. I nodded at the family photo he'd once mocked, now face down in a drawer. You're a reminder that I survived. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he had nothing to say. That Christmas, I rented a cabin in Colorado and spent the week alone, sketching by the fire. On Christmas morning, my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. Your mother showed me the Forbes article. Proud of you, mija tío Carlos. I stared at the message, then blocked the number. The approval I'd once craved now felt like a relic, an artifact from a life I'd outgrown. As snow fell outside, I opened a new sketchbook and drew a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, her arms outstretched to a sky blazing with stars. At the bottom I wrote, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and never look back. Epilogue: The Unanswered Question. Months later at a tech conference, a young founder asked me, how do you deal with family who don't believe in you? I thought of Daniel's empty cubicle he'd quit after 6 months and my mother's unopened letters. You stop asking them to, I said, and start believing in yourself. The room erupted in applause, but the only opinion that mattered was the one I'd fought a lifetime to hear my own. The morning of our $50 million acquisition announcement. I woke before dawn, I brewed coffee in the quiet of my Brooklyn loft, the city's skyline blinking like a constellation of possibilities. At 6:00 a.m., I laced up my running shoes and pounded the streets until my lungs burned, a ritual I'd kept since the months after Daniel's betrayal. The rhythm of my feet against pavement grounded me, a reminder that I could outrun the ghosts of who I used to be. By 8:30 a.m., the news had broken. Vivid Canvas was now the backbone of a global tech ecosystem. My name splashed across Bloomberg and Forbes. My phone lit up with notifications, congrats from investors, interview requests, a flurry of emojis from my team. Notably absent any message from my mother, my sisters, or the Park Hyatt wedding coordinator who'd once seated me with the caterers. I didn't care. At noon, I stood in front of my employees, the warehouse-style office buzzing with champagne flutes and nervous laughter. 3 years ago, I said someone told me I'd never succeed without him. Today, we're celebrating proof that the worst lies are the ones we stop believing. The room erupted in cheers. In the back, a new intern snapped a photo. Later, I'd spotted on Instagram with the caption, CEO Goals. But the moment that mattered came hours later, alone in my office. I scrolled past Sophia's vacation photos, her 3rd trip to Bali that year, and Lucia's tweet quoting her latest academic paper. For the first time, I felt nothing. No envy, no ache, no compulsion to post my own achievements, like grenades in our silent war. I'd outgrown the need to win their approval, and the freedom was dizzying. That weekend, I drove upstate to the small gallery where I'd sold my first painting at 19. The owner, Margot, a septuagenarian with ink-stained fingers, greeted me with a hug. Heard you on NPR last week, she said, gesturing to the corner where my old sketchbook sat in a glass case. Still think you're crazy for choosing pixels over oil paints, though. I laughed, running a hand over the display. My teenage self stared back from a charcoal sketch, wild-haired, paint-smeared, all defiance and hope I didn't choose one over the other. I said I just found a bigger canvas. Margot arched a brow. And the people who said you couldn't? I thought of Daniel now, a footnote in my HR files and my father's voicemail gathering dust. They're still there, I'm just elsewhere. The question found me during a live Q&A at Stanford. A young woman with pink-streaked hair and a vivid canvas tote bag asked, "How do you stop wanting validation from the people who hurt you?" The auditorium fell silent. I paused, my eyes tracing the mural behind her, a student's interpretation of resilience, all fractured lines and bold colors. "You don't," I said. "Finally, you just start wanting your own approval more. One day you'll wake up and realize their opinion matters as much as a Yelp review for a restaurant you'll never visit." The crowd chuckled, but I leaned forward, gripping the podium. The truth is, no one grants you permission to matter. You take it, you build it, you protect it, like it's the last dollar in your bank account. Afterward, the girl approached me, eyes shining. What if they never change? What if they die, still thinking you're not enough? I handed her my sketchbook open to a page where I'd drawn a phoenix rising from a pile of burnt bank statements and family portraits. Then you learn to mourn the relationship you deserved, not the one they offered. Now when I walk past Daniel's old cubicle, occupied by a 22-year-old prodigy who wears her ambition like armor, I feel neither rage nor triumph. Just quiet gratitude for the version of me who refused to fold. My family's silence no longer echoes. It's drowned out by the hum of servers in our data center and the ping of user transactions, 17,000 per minute, each one a testament to my choice to bet on myself. I've started painting again, not murals or boardroom visions, but small watercolors I leave in coffee shops and park benches. No signatures, no hashtags. Just a woman with her arms raised to the sky, forever mid-leap. So I'll ask you this. What would you build if no one were watching? What bridges would you burn if you knew the ashes could fertilize something new? And when the people who once defined your worth finally fade to static, will you be ready to hear your own voice? I'm still learning the answers. Maybe you are too. If you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, slide into my DMs. Send me your stories. Or better yet, keep them close, secret and sacred until the day you're ready to prove them wrong. The world is full of Daniels and distant parents, of glass ceilings and backhanded compliments, but it's also full of sketchbooks waiting to become empires of mornings that taste like second chances. What's your next move?